Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 66 of the Stomp the Bus Show. I'm your host, Mark Harris, alongside Colton Dodgson. And we got a lot to talk about. ASU just finished up its early signing day class, got in some transfers. ASU men's basketball continues to struggle, putting that lightly, and we're going to talk about it. So, Colton, how's it going, my man?
Good, man. I really appreciate your commitment to the episode numbers. I think it's cool that you've kept that running. What's it been? 2 years that we're doing this show?
Year and a
Something
half.
like that? Year and a half? Well, that's impressive too. But yeah, the episode numbers every show, that's dedication. So I have to point that out and tip my cap to you for that.
We're 3 episodes away from a big number.
Oh, I know that's why you started this show, to
Of
eventually be able
course.
to hit that, and I think that's why you've been so dedicated to keep it alive till its golden birthday, um, and then beyond. But so far, so good. I'm
Yeah,
almost
man.
on winter break, so a nice 2 weeks off incoming after tomorrow. So can never complain about that.
You guys have school tomorrow too?
It's like a work day.
Okay.
Yeah, we got to go in, say hello, and then say goodbye, essentially. So
Fun
nothing too
stuff.
demanding. Nothing too demanding, just gotta. I'm typically a first one in, last one out type of guy. You know me.
Of
Uh,
course. That is with your personality. That's the Colton I
and
know.
yeah, and rent is due every day. Success isn't owned; it's leased. So I'm not trying to miss any rent payments. I'm gonna go in. I'm gonna pay rent like I do every day, and then I'm gonna head out. So that's my plan.
There you go. All right. Well, you weren't the only Valley native working hard recently because Kenny Dillingham is out on the recruiting trail, out on the transfer trail.
Just call this show the Segway Hour with Mark.
That's right. That's right. There you
Yeah.
go. But yeah, ASU wraps up its early signing day class. It's important to remember this is the early signing day class. I'm sure they're still after a few recruits here and there, and because the official signing days, I think it's still in February. So this is not the final 2024 ASU recruiting class, but it's a good general representation. They have, just in terms of high school, they have 18 commits, 17 of whom have signed their letter of intent. Colin Charles out of St. Martinville, Louisiana, is still a hard commit, but there isn't any sort of like rumors of him going elsewhere. They really added they added three big offensive linemen recently with Terrell Kim out of Medford, Oregon, Filiva Saluni out of Kahuku, Hawaii. I'm pretty sure I pronounced that right. We'll see. And then Samisi Tonga, 6'4", 310 interior offensive lineman from West High School in Salt Lake City, Utah. Just Colton, what's kind of a thought that sticks out to you about this early signing day class so far?
Yeah, not only some of the pedigree of some of these recruits like Jason Brown and Jaden Fortier and some of those guys, but where they're coming from, right? The Pacific Northwest is something that it seems like this staff has hit extremely hard and is taking pride in hitting extremely hard. Jaden Fortier is the number one recruit out of Oregon, right?
Yeah.
And he seems to be bringing a lot of those guys with them or at the forefront of trying to bring those guys here. So one, it shows his level of commitment to this program and his excitement to play here, but also his desire to bring more of those guys here, which is awesome. I've been I feel like so much of this stuff happens way more than I thought in terms of recruiting. So much of this stuff happens on Twitter. Like it blows my mind how active these coaches are on Twitter. But you kind of have to be because all
Yeah.
of these kids are so online now. Like you have to sort of that's such a pivotal part of swaying these guys and hyping up what's going on, and they've done a great job of that. A lot of these guys are Polynesian players too, which seems to be something that this staff is really hammering home on too, is setting sort of like building that tradition a little bit with this program.
Yep.
And a lot of those players are steering into that as well, I've noticed, especially online and on social media and stuff, which is cool, man. It's cool to see these guys so excited to come here and excited to play for a program that's trying to develop that tradition, right? Or staff that's trying to develop that tradition a little bit. And what seems to stand out to me as well, or what has stood out to me, is the excitement for next year. It seems like a lot of these guys are like, we're not done yet. Wait till next year. Wait to see who's coming next year. All of this stuff. So it seems it's a very promising. It seems like I'm pretty sure this is the first class Dillingham has recruited, right? He didn't get
First
much
full
of
class, like first where he's been able to do it. Yeah.
I was trying to like do the math in my head and recall how much time he had recruiting when he first came in. But this is like with a year under his belt, his first full recruiting class. And I think the returns have been very promising, especially given the state of the program last year. It seems like a lot of these guys are excited to come in and excited to contribute and excited to help build out this program a little bit. I also see Prescott Valley on here.
James Giggy, D lineman.
Yeah, which is interesting. It's like, do your thing and we'll find you, sort of.
Well,
You
and
got
with him,
Chaparral.
apparently the reason they offered him a scholarship is just he just went to a camp and just played really well.
Right.
And they, like, even though he fell under the radar, they're like, oh well, okay, like maybe he's not getting recruited as highly because he's from Prescott, but
Right.
like if he did well enough at the camp, so.
Yeah, it looks like he's a 3-star guy. Not like super underrated, maybe from an evaluation standpoint, but underrated to the point that ASU was able to bring him in, and maybe that will fuel a pretty special career. We'll see. I don't know, but then you got Plas Johnson and Canyon Floyd too, a couple local Scottsdale guys, Horizon and Chaparral. So that's cool to see him, shooting for that Pacific Northwest pipeline, as well as local guys. There's some LA in there, some Texas too, which is awesome.
Yeah.
A lot of Texas. So yeah, a super promising first class. A lot of good stuff to see, but the pedigree of some of these recruits has really stood out to me.
Yeah, totally. And it's funny. They were ranked 45th in the composite. Right now they're 52nd. So I was like, honestly, I saw that today because I was looking at it last night and it was 45th and today it was 52. And I was like, what the heck happened? It turns out they didn't they pulled an offer for Elijah Besa, who is from Texas. And that if you look at the composite team rankings, like where ASU is in the 45 to 55 range, like ASU on 24/7, it's 194.25. But then all the other schools ahead of them, it's like 195, 195.7, 195, 196. It's all like if you add one more recruit, you can jump all the way up to like 45 again. And that just kind of shows you like you're kind of just bunched in with a lot of other Big 12 teams. Like you're near Kansas, you're near West Virginia, Arizona, Cincinnati, BYU, Iowa State, like Oklahoma State. You're just kind of in the mix with all of them. They're the only kind of Big 12 schools that are way ahead of the pack. Texas Tech is 23rd, and they have NIL money. Like they have way more NIL money than even a lot of SEC schools. They have more NIL money than them. And they got a 5-star.
Yeah, I know they signed Conyers. Didn't they just get some big high school recruit too, Texas Tech?
They got it. Well, they got a 5-star receiver.
Okay, that's what I was
thinking. 5 4-star guys, and yeah, they brought in Conyers. Conyers is from West Texas too, so that kind of makes sense. But yeah, I mean they have it's kind of like Texas A&M and Texas. Like they have the oil money boosters too. And if you're like Texas, like if you're one of those boosters, you've been waiting to be able to use NIL money and stuff because Texas Tech just hasn't been that great of a program, and this is a great avenue for them to get better. The only other schools that are like way ahead of ASU in terms of just the rankings in the Big 12 is, other than Texas Tech, you have TCU at 31 and UCF at 32, and like those make sense. I mean, TCU was in the national championship game last year. UCF, Gus Malzahn, has a bunch of. He's been coaching for years, and they're in Orlando too. So, but this is the league that ASU is in, and they're pretty much right in the middle of the pack right now. They could. I mean, it wouldn't be that ridiculous for them to finish with like the fourth or fifth best class if they add like one or two more high school players.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, given the state of where ASU was last year in terms of wins and losses and bowl ineligibility and this investigation over there, all of the things that went on with ASU last year, to turn the page and be where they're at in terms of recruiting in, let's say, Dillingham's first full recruiting cycle, if you're comfortable putting it that way.
Right.
It's impressive in terms of the timeline and the willingness that some of these guys have to committing to this program. It shows how well Dillingham and some of his staff members have recruited so early on. I know a couple of his guys, their names escape me right now, are
Rashad Samples, Brian Carrington.
Yeah, there you go. They're two of the top like 6 recruiters. I think it was in the Big 12 or maybe on a larger scale right now. So those two guys have done a great job. Dillingham's done a great job. I think a random little wrinkle to this that stood out to me was the graphics department, and that was something that I never really knew about. But it's. Did you see anything about that on like Twitter?
There was an article that Football Scoop did, and it was just kind of ranking all the best graphic. All the best graphic commit graphics that were out there, and ASU was on there, and it was really cool. It was a multi level
it was
image,
kind of like a video, right? It was 3D.
And I saw a quote where Dillingham said that they made that a huge priority, and these are the little things. Yeah. And you mentioned how the importance of being on Twitter is for these coaches. And someone these are the little things that really matter. And it's a big reason why we're so happy that we have Dillingham, is because he totally gets all this stuff about modern current day recruiting. It's not just going to someone's house and convincing their parents, this is a 40-year decision, not a 4-year decision, all that stuff. That's in the past. You got to be, it's a completely different world, for better or worse. There's plenty of downsides to it too. But yeah, so
it just showed me the level of depth that has gone into Dillingham's thinking when it comes to this recruiting. Is something that seems, it could seem so trivial to somebody else, a graphics department, and it was obviously pretty trivial to the last regime because
they didn't have a full-time graphics person.
Right. They had a bunch of part-time guys, and Dillingham's response was, we went out to find the 4 best guys and or the 4 best people, whoever's in the positions. We went out to find the 4 best people and make those people full-time. And it's I think when you value something like just value anything and create that full-time position for somebody, for them to show that what they're bringing to the table is valued in any capacity, right? In any, whatever it may be, graphics, whatever, you're going to see returns on that. And I think it's interesting that again, it's just Twitter graphics of these guys, but it's something that, they get to take pride in, and who knows, maybe other recruits want to see some 3D graphic of themselves. I mean, whatever, right? But it's just a small wrinkle, and I think it just shows the level of depth that has gone into Dillingham's thinking for his recruiting approach, right? Him and Samples in Carrington as well. So I think what they're doing right now and what they've done in year one has laid a pretty promising foundation for what they'll be able to do moving forward. Not only with the high school guys, but with some of these transfers. These transfers have me really excited, and I'm sure we'll get to that.
Yeah,
but
I want to get into that in a bit, but no, you mentioned the word depth is it's such a good word to use for his thinking about this, because it's not the 3D graphic itself that's the reason why you win a recruiting battle or why someone eventually ends up playing for you, but like it shows the level of detail that you're putting into this, the level of like thought, the level of like covering all your bases, like all these little things that add up, and if you're recruiting 17, 18-year-olds, like sometimes the cosmetic stuff does matter, like
100%.
Yeah.
When you've been looking at that stuff for your whole career, you grow up watching NFL guys and college guys and all the stuff that goes on with like TV production and especially with these kids growing up on social media, essentially, right? Some of these kids got social media probably entirely too early. Like they've grown up on this stuff. So they've seen a lot of these, recruiting pitches and graphics and all of that stuff dating back to when they had first started playing football. So like seeing themselves in one of those graphics and one of those whatever Twitter gifs and all of that stuff, man, like it seems, again, I keep saying it seems trivial, and I'm sure people listening
it is trivial,
are like,
but
why does this matter? But to kids who are like seeing themselves on some of this stuff, it could be a big deal. You're absolutely right.
And it's just and especially for, again, like we have like expectations that ASU football should be better than it's been the last 2 years. I think, that's pretty obvious, but like you're still in the grand scheme of things a mid-level program, even when you win, even when they were winning, 10 games a year with Todd Graham, like they were still doing that within the constraints of being a mid-level program. And so you can't just like roll the ball out and recruit like your Pete Carroll in the in 2003. And, they were like, like USC didn't even have a good weight room back then. It's like, okay, well, they could do that because they had Pete Carroll and they were USC. And like, that's ASU, you have to look for every single advantage that you can in the, NIL and all that stuff. Like, there's just a lot of variables. And so, like all the little details, like the graphic design, like when players transfer out, he's going on Twitter and being like, this is a great guy. You'll be lucky to have him, even if he may not even mean it, even if it's like, he's like gritting his teeth and being like, oh, I really wish we didn't lose so-and-so, but it's better, And I think, and sometimes he does mean it, because you saw, did we talk about this the last episode of Ryan Clark?
I don't think so, but I knew exactly what you were talking about. We might have talked about it, but I knew exactly what you were talking about. And like somebody of Ryan Clark's, it
was like a podcast that he was on.
Yeah, him talking about Kenny Dillingham and the impact that made on him and his family. That only bodes, that only helps, right? That doesn't really hurt, and it doesn't make a recruit feel like, if I decide a year down the line that this isn't the right fit for me, like I'm trapped and this guy's gonna hate me and he's gonna try to sabotage my career, whatever. I'm not saying that goes on, but it takes that pressure off a little bit to know that, like, okay, I'm coming to this position, and if I need to switch gears a year down the line, that's not going to be a sky's falling scenario for this guy.
Right. And it's another indicator of him not pushing against the current reality of college football too,
100%,
like
accepting.
You just, I think he said in his press conference the other day, like you just have to adapt. Like you can't just be like, this is how it should be and all this. Like you have to live in the reality that's present. You can't just be like, oh, this is how it should be. So
100%.
That's good. And you mentioned, Colton, the Polynesian aspect of this recruiting, like the just added element of that. And I want to show a tweet. This is from Samisi Tonga the other day. You got it's a graphic of, Terrell Kim, Celesi Manu from Reno, edge player, Tamisi Tonga, Joey Sua, and Issei Matuia. I'm probably mispronouncing some of these, but like, and then Zairus Fiasau, who was the defensive MVP at San Diego State last year as a linebacker, by the way. It's not like ASU's ever going to be like Utah or something, or like, like where it's like all poly guys, just because like there's just a higher population of Polynesian
like
people.
A deeper tradition, right?
Right, exactly, yeah. But like it is establishing something, and like the biggest issue with ASU last year was their offensive line. Well, they just added 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, big offensive linemen. And who knows if
guys who can compete.
These guys may not even play next year at all, but it's just more bodies, and you already have Sean Na'a as well. So
with the way the way they were dropping last year, man, we might see these guys play. Hopefully that doesn't happen again.
Oh, man.
You're losing however many O linemen they lost last season, but I would not be shocked if we saw some of these guys play. But at the very least, having depth it helps you sort of find the right guys. You have options. You're not forced to throw some of these kids in who might not be ready, right? You've got a couple or just one transfer guy coming in, Joey Sua. Shanko Matuita.
Yeah, I think he goes by Issei, and he started at New Mexico a lot. So
yeah, that's good. That's experience. And Joey Sua too, coming in from Arkansas, is
350.
Great. 3. That's insane. That's a big guy. 6'4", 350 is unreal. So yeah, addressing that is great too. There's just so many guys in this transfer class that look like we once we get into it, it's like you look at the corners, you look at the tight ends, you look at some of the front seven guys, Raleek Brown and the DB. It's just, dude, it's so awesome.
Yeah, totally.
What they've done on the transfer side of things. So a long snapper, man. Tyler Wade,
the most important position. Just ask the Washington Commanders. Yeah. So anyway, some other players they just got in recruiting: Rodney Bimage, corner out of Houston area; Chris Johnson out of Texas. I think he's going to be a really good player, Chris Johnson Jr. Albert Smith, Louisiana; Zechariah Sample. He's kind of he'll be like a kick returner guy. Excited to see him. Ramar Williams, low, not a hugely recruited player, but 6'3", 250. I think he's going to be good out of Mesa. Champ Westbrooks, O lineman, big frame. Martell Hughes, safety. Tony Lewis Nakuba, corner. He talks about Giggy, Plas Johnson, and then Canyon Floyd, who there's a chance Canyon Floyd is the best of these guys relative to his position. In this class,
as like a punter coming into next year, 100%.
Emphasis on the phrase relative to his position. Okay, like I'm not actually
100%. But punting and special teams in general is one of those positions where it's like you don't know what you have until it's gone. Like that's the most.
Punting lost us the Cal game. We would have beaten Cal if we had like adequate punting, but it doesn't matter.
Right. But it's the position that is most taken for granted on the field.
Absolutely.
And if you're able to have somebody who's steady at that position, I mean, if the Eagles had a steady punter, they might be Super Bowl champs. But I don't want to scratch that scab, especially given what just happened on Monday, Mark.
What happened, Colton?
You stayed alive. That's what happened.
That is true.
But I mean, the point being, punting is it's such an important position that gets no love. And if you're able to have that steady guy at the position, and we'll see if Kenyon Floyd is that guy. That would be awesome if he kind of solidifies that position for the foreseeable future. And I
The
guess
way
we'll
he's
see
been
what
talked
happens.
about, like he
Yeah,
is
he's
that
been
yeah,
real
like
hyped up. I've seen it a ton. Obviously, I work at Horizon, so that's cool to see that. But yeah, man, we'll see what happens.
yeah, for sure. All right, well, let's get into the transfers. Eighth ranked transfer class, which when you put it all together, that means ASU is at 40th overall in the transfers and high school. So that's a decent spot to be. It's a, like all things considered. Um, I mean, let's just get into it. Rayleigh Brown is the crown jewel of this transfer class. Like when I was like, I just remember hearing about, oh, he's considering ASU, and I'm like, oh, okay, like that's cool. Like maybe he'll come to ASU and not, end up actually committing. No, he's here, and like I just the what we saw from him at USC last year was really like you could just see the athleticism. It just popped off the screen. Former 5-star recruit, like it's just awesome to have him. Like honestly, him and getting him and Jason Brown, like I guess the one thing that like really stood out for people this year is like you saw how Scatterboo was used, and like if you're a running back, like you can see like, oh, I can see myself thriving in this Dillingham offense.
Right. Not only a running back, but like a weapon, right?
Yeah,
A guy who can
absolutely.
catch the ball, a guy who can make plays after the catch, a guy who can run it between the tackles. And this is a guy who can seemingly do all of that from you talked about it, the pedigree that he had coming out of high school, playing at I always mess this up.
Mater
Mater Day.
D, modern
Mater
day.
Day. There you go. Mater Day. There it is. Playing at Mater Day and all of the stuff that comes with all of that, right? And
Right.
the hype that has surrounded this guy. So getting him into this system with Dillingham after what we saw in terms of Dillingham's creativity last year, a lot of it out of necessity, a lot of it because
Right.
he had to, right? But getting a guy like Rayleigh Brown in the mix and using him as sort of a weapon in your offense is such an exciting proposition. And I can't wait to see how him and Scatabo mix in and some of the things that we'll see Dillingham do with both of those guys, right? Like seeing both of those dudes in a backfield, like what do you do, right? That just puts even more
Yeah.
stress on a defense. And I'm sure we'll see that at some point, right? Mixing in personnel, getting creative with the packages. And this guy is such a versatile chess piece to all of that.
Oh yeah,
Um,
dude. I
so it's just it's so awesome to get him in here, and I can't wait to see what he does.
yeah, man. Like that is I love having like, and you know what else? Like this is really like cosmetic, but like Rayleigh Brown is a guy that like a lot of people have heard of, and again, it's like not actually like this doesn't actually win you football games, but it is like, oh, okay, like people like larger or higher profile football players, former recruits are taking Dillingham seriously too. I mean, you saw that with Rashada, you see with Jason Brown, I mentioned, like, so that's
Yeah,
very good.
that's another guy, dude, who's going to come in and mix in with Rayleigh Brown and Jason. You got Jason Brown and Scatterboo, and the weapons are
The
just
Carlos
it's
Brooks,
insane, man. Yes,
he was
100%.
very
All of
good.
these
Like,
guys,
yeah, when he played this past year, like he was good.
they have a deep running back room now, and that's been. I mean, as long as we've been watching ASU, you go down the list of those running backs that have not only been special but were special alongside other running backs.
Right.
Has always been sort of a calling card for ASU, and that sort of transcended, head coaches. It's been
Oh,
impressive
totally.
to see how that element of ASU's offense has stayed consistent across the board. But getting the proposition of something like that back, especially after a year where Scatterboo was kind of not only the workhorse running back, but the punter and occasionally a quarterback and all of those things, getting that running back depth back is extremely exciting. And not only that, it's like I mean, where are these guys going to line up too? You know, it's not. I don't think a lot of these guys are going to be limited to just the backfield, which is cool. Maybe you
Right.
get some screens in the mix with these guys lining up in the slot. You get a lot of motion going. They're versatile, which is just another element to this. But it's awesome to see.
Well, and another thing, I mean, yeah, no, you kind of hit the nail on the head. Other transfers, we talked about Matuia, we talked about Joey Sua. I want to touch on Kamari Wilson and where is he? LaTerrence Welsh. LaTerrence Welsh. Both super highly recruited guys out of high school. I mean, 98.07, 95.03 for LaTerrence Welsh. Like these are guys that like are we're borderline 5-star guys, go to, high profile SEC schools. And for whatever reason, it doesn't work out or they're not playing. Great to get those guys in. We talked about Zyrus Fiaso already from San Diego State and what he did there. Jordan Crook has some experience at linebacker at Arkansas in the SEC. And I highlight those two guys because we talked about the offensive line problems last season, but the linebacker depth was hit really bad too, and you're going to bring back Tate Romney, you're going to bring back McCullough, but you lose Travion Brown. And so now but when you bring in Crook and Fiasel, like it's just more depth, it's more high level experience. And it's just good to plug those holes because like, even though like linebacker in, today's football isn't like the most valuable position relative to some others, it's, you don't want bad linebackers. Like I don't want to bring up the Eagles, but like I'm sorry, but like it's
don't do that.
Like, but that's my point.
Know.
Like your reaction.
You're 100%
like,
right.
Yeah.
Having bad linebackers limits, especially in a modern football landscape and facing modern offenses.
Yeah.
Having linebackers who cannot play their role limits everything that you do.
Yeah.
So they're so important on the field, and having not only a solid couple at the top of your depth chart, but having that depth at that position and guys who can mix in and guys who can spell other guys and guys who can defend the pass and drop into coverage and run with tight ends and even hang with slot receivers when they need to, man. Like linebackers are becoming such an underrated staple of a modern defense.
Yeah.
And are still being overlooked by certain teams that I don't want to comment on right now. Because they've caused a lot of turmoil for me over the last 3 weeks for that exact reason, a lack of linebacker depth. So
yeah, for sure.
We'll leave it at that.
For sure. Touch on a few more guys. Justin Wadley, JP Dieter are defensive lineman transfers from Cincinnati and Purdue, respectively. Who knows what to expect from them, but you can never have enough D-line depth. We talked about Welsh and Wilson. You also have Javen Robinson transferring over from Wazoo. That's big. Tight ends, Cameron Harple from San Diego State, and then Marcuston Douglas, who is a huge 6'4", 285 as a tight end. That's going to be like, he's going to be used in some fun ways. But
yeah,
maybe
definitely.
The most interesting transfer other than Great League Brown is Sam Levitt from Michigan State. He was a 4-star prospect coming out of high school, and he was in the same class as Rashada. And when Levitt announced that he was transferring to ASU, there were some ASU fans, which I understand after being an ASU fan, that were immediately went into panic mode, like, oh, Rashad is going to go, all this. And Dillingham said, the other day that he told Rashada they were going to add another quarterback, and Rashada's like, that's fine. Like, I'm not worried. I'm not scared of competition and all that. And to me, like, this is a great type of quarterback to get, because if, like, honestly, like, if Rashada does leave at some point, you have this guy to fill in. And it's like, he was a 4-star, high-level recruit as well. So it's not like you're just bringing in some guy who's like, probably resigned to be the backup. Like Levitt is coming in here thinking like I have a real chance to start, and
he does, man. He
yeah,
absolutely does.
he does. He does. I wouldn't put him as the favorite, but he has a real chance,
No, but I think this is what's so important that can't be overlooked with Levitt as well. You talked about that element of like, oh, a possible contingency plan and all of that, which is definitely a layer of this, right? If he now you have essentially two dart throws at a guy that can be a more longer term
yeah,
quarterback for you, as long term as a quarterback in the transfer portal era can possibly be.
right.
But not only that, you have two guys who are going to be grinding it out all spring, competing, or spring and fall ball, whatever, right? Whenever they do their workouts, grinding it out, competing for those positions, and then you're going to have a dude who not only worked in this system all throughout the offseason. I would not be shocked if this is a decision that comes down to the wire, right? Given what we saw from Levitt, and obviously he came from such a dysfunctional situation. But if he shows up and he plays as advertised, essentially, this could be sort of a battle that's not necessarily decided early on, right?
Right.
Which the point that I'm making with all of this is now, let's say Rashada wins this battle, 2 games in, he's hurt and he's going to miss 2 to 3 weeks, right? You have that depth. You still have Bourget, I believe. I haven't seen that Bourget's gone. So you still have Bourget, you still have Levitt or Rashada, and that gives
Still
you
Conover.
and Conover, but
That was
gives you
that was
three. Conover, we'll say Conover's there. Conover, yeah, he's in the room, but that gives you three guys. That gives you 3 guys that you could hopefully be confident in running your offense. Which after the and again, we saw an extreme rash of injuries last year, right? Like I don't think hopefully we're not going to go through something like that again. But I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility to see your starting quarterback go down at some point and miss some time, right? So now you're not essentially like, oh, now we have to have Scadaboo throw 6 passes and have our tight end run the wildcat all the way down the whatever, right? So it's not only like, okay, we have 2 shots at this thing to find our long-term guy, but now we have the depth in the immediate future to not be completely hopeless should somebody run into injury trouble.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so just kind of putting a bow on this, like pretty good job by ASU. It's not it's not finalized yet and all that, and they can still add more transfers potentially. So a really good, like it's just a good solid like class. It's not it's not a crazy like you have like 8, 5 or 4 stars committed or something like that. Like that would be great. Like I'm not gonna pretend that would be, but I feel like they kind of addressed a lot of positions too. Especially, I mean, they did add a lot of O linemen. I wish they would add one more offensive tackle, transfer. But I mean, the offensive tackle, like apparently the offensive tackle market in the transfer portal, like those guys are really valuable because there just aren't that many like good offensive tackles in college football. So who knows where we'll be on that front. Another thing that Dillingham said that I saw that Dillingham said in his press conference following early signing day was that they had like enough, like the NIL money that came in is real. It's not like totally life changing for ASU, but it's definitely a step up compared to where we were last year, and that's a big deal.
100%, and it makes you competitive in this landscape. I mean, whatever you have is better than relying on developing players. So,
right, totally. So good start. And again, it feels like Dillingham has a clear vision, for the program. Like there is a clear path forward, and he, like there's a lot of talk about what his plans are for the 25 class. And so hopefully he builds on this class with that. So do you have any kind of final thoughts before we transition over to men's basketball?
Not necessarily. I think we're about to switch gears a little bit in terms of optimism, but also like I don't know. I just feel like this is the Bobby Hurley experience. This is how it always happens, you know? Like I feel
No,
like
I was talking about football.
no. I know, and I'm
Oh,
just thinking basketball in terms of like. Never mind. I got ahead of myself. But for football, no, we're good. I'm excited. Foundation seems solid. I'm excited to see where they go from here, and what this team continues to be, how this team continues to be shaped leading up to next season.
absolutely. All right. Well, we got to talk about what's happened with ASU men's basketball recently, and it's not good. It is not good. There's no fun way to say it. They've been absolutely blown off the floor in their past two games. Um, and prior to that, they lost on the road at San Diego, not San Diego State, San Diego. Um, this is, I feel like this is the low point of the Hurley era. And I know that there have been some ugly games over the Hurley era. And maybe I'm forgetting. I guess I'm not. I'm just not holding the first 2 years against him because it was still like building the program. Um, and I'm just making excuses for the COVID, uh, whatever 2021 I think it was, or just some of those years where just COVID really threw off the program. But man, like there's just right now there's just not like an excuse. Like it's just how can they shouldn't be this bad, That's kind of where my head is at.
100%. I mean, it's just like every time watching you watch this team, they are so streaky, and it's a known fact that Bobby Hurley like will kind of just let his guys freelance as long as they're intense on the defensive side, or like that's kind of
Right.
the trope with this team, right? That's kind of the mentality. Everybody knows that's Bobby Hurley's approach with his players is like as long as you play hard, kind of do what you want. Um, and I mean sometimes that works, but that just shows it's just a system that will magnify how streaky guys can be, especially at this level, right?
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes they're unconscious, and Bobby Hurley teams can get unconscious. We saw that against Nevada last year, right? In that first four game. But when they're off and there's no system to like rely on, it's kind of just okay. Fight back, get back into it. And they're cold. When they're cold, they're gonna lose by 20. There's like they're not gonna be a
Yeah.
competitive team when they're not on. There's nothing really there for them to like settle into. And maybe it's tough to do that when you have to turn over your roster every year, but that's just the state of college basketball.
Yeah, that's the
You
thing.
know,
Yeah, I agree with you.
everybody's turning over the roster. Like I don't know, but this is the Bobby Hurley experience, man. Like you go through stuff like this. I remember last year it was the loss to San Francisco. Didn't they lose to somebody else too? That was like they shouldn't have lost to early on in the
They lost it.
non-con.
Yeah, they lost to Texas Southern, but I guess where I'm
Okay,
going to
that's who it was.
push back at you on like this is the Bobby Hurley experience is like they also beat Michigan last year. They beat VCU. I think they beat another
That's
Power
true.
Five team that's good. Like I don't have their last year's schedule at me, but like this year they played uh, 5 games against Power Five, what power competition. They've been blown out in 4 of those games. They beat Vanderbilt, but they got blown out by Mississippi State. They got blown out by BYU. And I look like I've been a huge Hurley defender because ASU basketball historically is just a bad basketball program. Like, especially if you compare like the history of ASU basketball to all the teams in Power 5 leagues and Power 6 if you include the Big East, whatever. Like it's probably bottom 5. Like it's really bad. Like there, and so that's why like I'm okay with like uneven game flow, uneven like weird streaky stretches throughout the season because it has led ASU to 3 tournament berths and a would have been tournament berth in 2020, right? Like, so I've been okay with the downsides, but I just don't think it's ever been this bad, you know? And especially after getting blown out by TCU, and you're playing in Phoenix against Northwestern on Wednesday night. And I get it. It wasn't like there's a ton of ASU fans there and all that, but that was a huge game. Like if you had won that game against Northwestern, I think you're entering conference play at 7-4 instead of 6-5. You would have had a good win under your belt because Northwestern's good, but they scored 13 points in the first half, and like it felt like the only way they were going to score is if Frankie Collins got a fast break. Like that's just the downside
to the offensive philosophy.
Like that reminds me of like some of our intramural basketball games in college where like we were in a league that we shouldn't have been in. We're like playing guys who like played high school basketball, you know, and we're like that's what it looked like, and that's like not what not the thought that should be going through my head.
No, you're 100% right, man, and I think you might be onto something with the the thought that it's never really looked bad, because I don't think it has either. And scoring 13 points and a half is just insane, and it's weird because the non-con is kind of bookended by 2 terrible offensive performances. They did the same thing against Mississippi State to open the season, and it's troubling that they're now doing the exact same thing on the heels of 3 straight losses to end the non-con leading into conference play. So you're absolutely right. It's troubling. Their best win over the stretch might have been SMU?
Probably SMU. Yeah.
Yeah. So, not great in terms of tournament prospects. Those look extremely,
dude, I can't even
extremely dim right now. So yeah, it's not great. I'm with you.
No, and it's just like I get that Zane Meeks and Sean Phillips are injured, and you had some time without Adam Miller this year, but like again, like I was like defending the team on our last episode and like, oh well, Mississippi State's good and BYU's good, and sometimes you lose some of these games, like, but it all came down to you weren't losing to the really small schools up until you lose to San Diego. And you had opportunities ahead of you. It's like, okay, well, if you split against TCU and Northwestern, then that puts you in a good spot because those are 2 good programs. Instead, you lose by a combined 39 points. It's and the other thing is like ASU's going to have a new AD soon, eventually. Like, and if we're like taking off, the ASU shirt that I'm wearing right now and just look at it as a completely like neutral perspective, I just don't think the AD is going to be like, yeah, we're going to roll with Hurley in the future as we head to the Big 12. I just don't.
Yeah, it's a good point, especially when you consider like he was hired by a previous regime. You see that a lot of times where it's like, or you see that pretty often where in a lot of circumstances where it's a holdover from a previous tenure, and you evaluate that with sort of a different lens. You don't really have the commitment level that somebody else might have had depending on your outlook on the performance, right? So I guess it's definitely up for debate, considering, and I guess you'll have to consider how the rest of the season goes.
Of course.
Who they hire, all those sorts of things. If they go on like a 7-game conference winning streak, it's like, okay, that's just the Hurley experience. But I agree with you. This is probably it is somewhat par for the course in terms of what we've seen under Hurley, but it's way worse than what we've seen under Hurley. Right?
Yeah, and like you mentioned,
I think I would agree with you there.
Yeah, like you mentioned a hypothetical like 7-game conference winning streak, and like there are ASU teams in the past that have like done like stuff like that. But I just don't see it coming with this team. I don't. And the Pac-12 is also better than it was. It's better this year than it was last year. You know,
Mhm.
and there's benefits and downsides to that because if you lose a bad game last year, it could have messed you. You know, but still, on a night-to-night basis, it's going to be harder this year. Both the Washington schools are
100%.
better. Arizona looks to be better than they were last year. Utah's better. Colorado's better. Oregon's better. Like Oregon State's better. You know, ironically, it's the two LA schools that have been the biggest disappointments, which is funny to me. But it's just like it's it just feels like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. You know?
With basketball.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Specifically, but yeah.
I think no, 100%, and I agree with you. It's not like I think it's such a stark contrast to what we're seeing with football, where it's like, okay, this is progress, this is momentum in terms of the personnel and who you're bringing in. Um, Obviously, basketball is a much smaller roster. It's a way different landscape in terms of professional prospects and the guys who stick around for longer term, whatever, right?
Yeah.
All of those things considered and taken into account, it's two programs with like completely different outlooks, I feel, in terms of like you can't even look at this as like, okay, so what are they building on? It's
No.
we kind of know what's gonna happen. It's gonna be roster turnover next year in a much better basketball conference. We've talked about that a lot on this show too. ASU might be one of the worst teams,
It's
will
looking
be
like
one of
it.
the worst
Yeah.
teams in the Big 12 for however long, right? Like,
Yeah.
um, so while the prospects for football kind of that outlook looks a little better in terms of conference realignment, it's so much worse for basketball. And we'll kind of see one what Bobby Hurley's future looks like once ASU makes a new AD hire and
Right.
that AD is given time to evaluate Hurley and things like that, consider the financial ramifications, whatever, right? We'll see what that looks like, but I think we're looking at two programs that are trending in different directions.
Yeah. And the other thing with basketball, it's like the elephant in the room, and this is one of the reasons why I've been defended Bobby is the arena. Like it's not we've talked about the arena a bunch, like it's but it's just not up to snuff. And it's still an issue, obviously. And that again, it's one of the reasons why I've been like Bobby's had to overcome that. But you can't just be like I don't have like an endless supply of forgiveness, like you can't just be getting blown off the court. Like so yeah, ASU men's basketball not in a good spot. So do you have anything to add before we kind of touch on a few things and wrap this up?
Not really, man. I agree with you. There's not much to talk about with ASU basketball. It's just a wait and
Well,
see,
yeah.
and we'll see how they look with the conference schedule coming up.
Yeah. And I know we have talked about like Bobby did get some really good recruits. Like we have a good recruiting class, but at this point, like it just that doesn't move the needle for me, So we'll see. Maybe they, sweep the Bay Area schools and get a split with Cal and Utah the following weekend, and things are looking up. And then what would they be? 9-6. When you say it out loud, that doesn't sound that great, but like they would be
It's
playing
better
better. But
than
even that, I
Texas.
don't know. I feel like it's
Yeah.
much more likely they go 1-3 in their next 4 games than go 3-1. So not good. Few more ASU things to touch on. Quickly with volleyball, we've been talking about them all year. They played like a day or two after our most recent show. Lost to Stanford in 4 sets. Won the first set, but then lost the next 3. Honestly, a great season for volleyball. Like that's just you losing to Stanford is not a shame at all. They're a great program. Hockey, they remain at number 13 in the USCHO poll. They had 2 ties with Dartmouth one weekend, then went on the road and swept Robert Morris, and they're going to play in this thing called the Adirondack Invitational next week, where they play Clarkson, Cornell, and UMass. So
I think I'm
that'll
supposed
be
to go
something
to
to
that.
watch for.
Is that one at Mullet?
No, it's in New York. Like upstate New York.
Oh, but there's a tournament at Mullet coming up.
Yeah,
right?
I think there's a tournament after this one.
Oh, the Desert Hockey Classic, isn't that it?
Yeah.
So whatever it is, I'm supposed to be going to that. So I'm excited to go see them play. I haven't seen them play in years, so it'll be cool to see it.
Have you been to Mullet?
I've never been. I've heard great
It's
things.
pretty
I've seen
cool.
pictures,
It's
so.
pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to checking it out, man.
Yeah, it's a fun environment. And another thing that happened in between our most recent shows is a certain former ASU quarterback won the Heisman. Jaden Daniels beat out Michael Penix and Bo Nix and Marvin Harrison to win the Heisman. Honestly, he totally deserves it. Like, I'm not going to come at and say like he didn't, he's, you know, all that. And like, no, like he totally deserves it. Another thought I have is this would sting a lot more if LSU had gone 11-1 and it was in the college football playoff right now. But they went 9-3. So it just doesn't sting as much as an ASU fan. And that's really not even a fault of Jaden Daniels, because pretty much other than the Florida State game, their first game, I mean, they lost like a shootout to Ole Miss and he was injured against Alabama. So it's like, I get why he won the Heisman. And then it's just,
I think just such an incredible season. And sorry, you can go ahead and finish your thought.
No, go ahead.
Just boosted his draft stock tremendously.
Oh yeah.
To where we're going to see this guy possibly as a top 15 pick in April. So
absolutely. And as a Seahawks fan, like, I'd be totally happy if they drafted him. If
you're not rolling with Drew Lock,
dude, don't even get me. There is so much sports radio debate about Drew Lock versus Geno Smith right now, and to me, like, Geno's been so much better than Drew Lock. I don't even think it's
that's the
real conversation.
James Bradbury.
Yeah. So, but if the Seahawks do end up drafting Jaden Daniels, I'd be very happy. And one more final thought I have. This came from a tweet from Adam Brenneman, who was actually a former ASU coach. And it just illustrates how, I don't know if you can see this, Colton, but it just illustrates how
I saw this too.
How much the 2021 ASU team just underachieved. I mean, you have Jaden Daniels, Johnny Wilson, Rashad White, Ricky Pearsall, Conyers, Chip Trainum, Curtis Hodges, Ladarius Henderson. Someone replies, snuck Hodges in there. LMAO. Hey, Curtis Hodges in the NFL.
He's an NFL tight end, man.
Yeah, or at least he was. So, but I mean, he wasn't like, no one was expecting him to have like 10 touchdown receptions that year. But all the rest of the guys, like Jalen Conyers was younger and like, but like, yeah, it just does. That really picks at the wound a little bit of that 2021 season where it's like, man, like they should have gone better than 8-5. I'm sorry. Like I know an 8-4 season, like throughout like the history of ASU is like not bad, but that just looking at it only from that sense, just completely removes all the context, and how much penalties they had, and they went 1-4 against winning teams in the regular season, which that's just, and they had a relatively easy schedule. We had our first show. You were saying ASU should have been the team that Utah was that 2021 season, and when you look at the talent, like it's not just some Homer ASU fan opinion, like.
No.
Yeah.
They had some solid. That's just their offense, man. They had some solid defensive players on that team too. There was talent on both sides of the ball. So just massively underachieved, and it's a bummer, man. But good for Jaden Daniels. He had a great
year.
Boosted his draft stock. Yeah, we'll be watching him. We'll be watching him on Sundays. That's for sure. He'll be a nice fantasy quarterback too, I think.
He will be an awesome fantasy quarterback.
Yeah.
No, like all that 2021 team had to do is go 10-2. And they probably would have gone to like, even if they didn't win the Pac-12, even if they didn't beat Utah on the road, like forget about even just like Pac-12, just go 10-2. There's a chance you may have gone to a New Year's Six Bowl. And like that would have been like that is all that's like what I'm asking for as an ASU fan. Like take advantage of the opportunities when they present themselves to you. And they did not do that year.
They had a window for sure.
Yeah. And especially the thing, I mean, we all knew, everyone knew who followed the program, like bad things were coming down the way. So you like just take advantage of this talented roster in a pretty easy schedule while you have it. And they didn't fully do that. Because they didn't even play Oregon that year. Oregon wasn't on their schedule. And they also caught USC and UW in like their two of their worst years ever. Like both of those schools went 4-8 that year. So yeah, just not fun, but happy for Jaden. Totally deserves it. No salt here for any of the players. Yeah. So, all right, Colton. Any final thoughts before we wrap this bad boy up? I think your screen's frozen.
Oh, there you are.
All right. I just said, any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
No, man. I think we covered everything. Good show.
Absolutely.
Yeah, looking forward.
Oop.
From football moving forward, not necessarily basketball, but
For sure. All right. Well, Colton, thanks for coming on. Our next episode will probably be sometime in the new year. So Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, and go Devils.